Welcome everyone to the Friday, April 10th edition of the Open Forum for Microsoft Teams and O365. This is just an open Q&A session around any Office 365 questions you might have that we will try and verbally answer and or demonstrate to you how to solve the problem or to answer the question you're trying to get answered. My name is Nathan Austin. We're also joined by Gerald Howland, who's the CTO of Mytech, and Stephanie Kingsley is the producer behind the scenes and will be staffing or reviewing the Q&A session, the Q&A column. So this time I'd like to ask anyone who's online, go ahead and start on in your right hand, I think it's the right hand side of your screen, there's a Q&A option, and throw any questions out there to be asked that will kind of queue up when we get to that point. So I'm going to do a couple introductory things. I have a few things on my list to potentially go through, depending on that might prompt some questions from folks that join. But for now, I'd like to just kind of tell you a little bit about Mytech. So, you know, we're not a training company. We are an IT services and consulting company that we work with small and medium businesses. We've been doing this for 20 years, and we've learned through pain lessons that are to develop a proven IT strategy that we know can achieve deliver proven results for you as a small business. So our goal is to enable you to spend your highest and best use of your time on those things and deal with all the challenges that you as a business face. That we all face as businesses. IT is only one of those challenges. So our goal is just to help you remove that one from the equation to help you free up to spend more time on all the other challenges that we all get to work on. We hope to make IT easy for you. That's one of the reasons why we do these sessions, is to show you how to use the tools that are available to you and answer questions you might have to use the tools. Again, to make it as easy as possible for you to be self-sufficient and productive. Through the collaboration, we believe that our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So that's a little bit about us. I always like to include that, but that's not why you're here today. Is more to learn about Office 365. So I'd like to, hopefully the questions will show you how to do different variables and different options and questions. And so let's start by, what are some of the Teams and Office 365 questions that we can answer, that we can show you. And if we run out of questions, I have a list. So Stephanie, I'd like to open up to the Q&A. If you don't have anything yet, I'll start going down my list.
Nope, I do have a couple here. The awesome. First one is, can you link a team with an Outlook group?
Can you link a team with an Outlook group? So it's a great question. I'm going to go down to, I'm going to click on Outlook to start this conversation. So one of the things that you may notice in your Outlook on the left-hand side is when you open that up, you'll see groups down here, and these groups are created by teams that you're by different. Why is that not showing more? I thought that would show more. Usually these groups, Gerald, help me out here. I'm surprised that's not populating more groups. Usually these are the groups that are populated by the teams of which you're a part. Can you talk about that? Because otherwise I wanted to show the teams section. Usually the groups, when you create a team, you're also creating a group or a communications group. So each members of these different teams have corresponding groups that go along with them. So by default, the answer to your question is when you create a team, it creates a group. And Gerald, correct if I'm wrong on that.
So they're kind of related to each other. So if you have an existing O365 group, which is what an Outlook group is based upon, then yes, you can add the Teams functionality in the admin portal. You can say, based upon this group, go ahead and add a new, based upon this existing group, create a new team. But I believe you have to do it from the admin portal and not from the actual Teams interface. So I think you have to do it from the background admin portal. That's as long as it is a what they call an Outlook group and not a contact group inside Outlook. So if you have a group of people in Outlook that are contacts, that does not synchronize back and forth between the 2 different platforms.
So you can, if you have an existing group, an Outlook group, you can link it to a team.
You can link it to a new team. You cannot link it to an existing team.
To a new team. Okay. All right. So then that would be, yes. So that would be an admin function. So that's something that if you want to do that, you would want to put in a request to either MyTech if we're your IT support, or to your internal IT or to your support organization, because that's a back-end admin function. You can also do that with SharePoint sites too. So you can link SharePoint sites to teams, but I believe that's a back-end admin function as well, because otherwise by default, when you create a team, it creates a SharePoint site as well.
Yeah, so a lot of it kind of comes down to the back-end design of the platform, where a lot of it is designed around a special type of group inside 365 called an O365 group. And all of the different functions like SharePoint, Outlook groups, teams, they all use that same group to kind of manage the interface. And so if you create a group for one of those functions, you can add that as an addition in other. You can use that same group to add the other features just through the appropriate management interface.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thanks, Jerome.
Awesome. Next question. Can you change the calendar that an Outlook invite is posting to?
Can you change the calendar that an Outlook invite is posting to? So I'd like to ask this person to clarify their question. As are you trying to potentially add calendars? I'm not sure. I mean, are you trying to invite or relative to shared calendars? Because otherwise I'm not exactly sure I understand the question. Gerald, do you have any insight into that?
I really don't. I'm trying to think if you create an additional calendar, like in your like an additional personal calendar. Don't know if you can actually say create this appointment in that calendar or not. I don't. Yeah, I guess it would kind of depend upon what we're talking about for a calendar standpoint. For the most part, if you're inside 365 and using Teams inside 365, the calendar you see in Outlook is the same as you see in the calendar function, which is the same as the calendar in Teams. They all access the same data set. So
yeah,
yeah, I don't. I'll do a quick test here and see if I can find out.
Yeah, but I think that's where it syncs to your individual user calendar or the groups. That's where it uses. So like when you send out these invites, for instance, the invite that I have scheduled on, I did a recurring invite. So I did a weekly virtual team meeting for the operations team. So I picked the channel that I wanted this to be in. I chose the recurrence of the series, and notice I didn't add any attendees because by default, because I selected the operations team's general channel, anyone who's a member of the operations team will have this calendar item posted to their calendar. And that actually ties to the last question about Outlook groups, is that this uses the operation team's communications group in order to send that invite and post this to their calendar based on their user, based on you being a member of that group. So so in that regard, that's how that all connects. As Gerald said, this is tied to this is my Teams calendar as I'm logged into Teams, and it reflects. If I just go to the week view, it's the same view in my calendar here as it is in Teams.
Okay. Do you want to move on and we can come back?
Yeah, next question, unless there's been any clarity. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Can you convert a private team to a public team after it's been created?
I don't think so. I know that when you create a team, so for instance, you're asking about private and public teams. So, or private, are you talking about the team or the channel? That's a good question. So let's address both. So if you notice these channels down here, I hit the channels really quick because on the channel side, this is note the little lock here means that it's private, and what that means is that only people who have access to this channel, which is a subset of the operations team, will see this. They won't even see it if they're not part of this private group. You can only create a channel when you create a channel. I'll say add channel, for example. So I clicked on the little ellipse, clicked add channel. It's here that you can choose to make it standard or private. You cannot take an existing team channel and make it private after it's been created. What I don't know is if you can change the channel from private. I don't think you can change it from private to public at that point. So that's at the channel level. Now let me also go. So when I created this,
I need to add in there. You cannot change channels between public and private either way. Once you create a channel, it is stuck that way, but you with the team, you can change them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to go into, is I imagine that, so for instance, and forgive me, I seem to go too fast. So if you go down to the bottom, now the ability to do this, by the way, is a public service announcement, to join or to create a team. We recommend you limiting that to some subset of people so that the team structure that ends up being built in your organization is aligned to your operational structure, whether it be, again, all company information, departmental level information, cross-functional teams that exist, etc. So that most people should not have this ability to create a team and do what I'm about to show you, because you want to restrict that so that at least our recommendation is to restrict that so you don't get team sprawl that might not be aligned to your organization. So if I could select create a team, I'm going to, for this illustration, build from scratch. I think this might have been the nature of the question. If you started a team with, is this, again, private, meaning you have to specifically identify the people they're going to join, versus a public team where anyone in your organization can join. And that's where, for instance, down here it says join or create a team. If you have a public team and you're not a member, you could choose to join that team, because you're basically saying by making it a public team, anyone in your organization can join. Or the other option is organization-wide, which means everyone in your organization is automatically joined by default, such as, for instance, the all-company team. So when I created the all-company team up here, the type of team it is, and I don't know if it says it specifically. Yes, team members will automatically added and removed to reflect your Active Directory. So as you add or remove members to your organization, they will automatically be added or removed to this team. What I don't know, and I think that's the nature of the question, is can we change that? You know what I mean, Gerald? I think that was the nature of the question.
Yeah, so you can't change, if you create a global team, you cannot change it. If it's an org-wide team, you can't change it. But we should be able to. I don't know if it's they're taking more of these kinds of changes out of the Teams interface, and it might be in the background admin interface.
Yeah.
Where you actually have to change that.
Yeah, because so for instance, if you notice,
the background interface, it is possible though.
Okay, so that's good to know. So in the background, it looks like it is, but if you notice, like, so for instance, this team is I made it an all company and all org team. And when I click on manage, so you click on the breadcrumbs and say manage team, it does say at the top, like I mentioned earlier, and again, it gives you even an indicator. It's an org wide team up here. I wonder if this allows me, I'm clicking on this and it doesn't give me anything to do. So it's giving you some indicators. It's the type of team it is. Whereas the marketing team is a department team. So that's a private team where I only invited marketing team members. And if I click on manage that team there, it just says it's a team up here, not an org-wide team. And notice that indicator up here saying it's not saying all members are going to be added. So so you'll see which teams are which, but it looks like that you're not able to change that setting in the Teams interface. It's a backend admin function if it can be done, as Gerald mentioned it can. So good question. I had not been asked that question before.
Awesome. And we do have some clarification to the Outlook calendar question before. So the individual said that now that they're working at home, they have a couple of accounts in Outlook, and the default is not their work account. So when they receive an event invite, it's defaulting to the default calendar.
That's interesting. It's almost like you've got two accounts, like you've got your main account, and it's like if I added this is our demo account tenant, and then if I added my MyTech tenant down here, and it's defaulting to the wrong calendar. That's interesting. You should be able to change that. I'm just trying to understand how that, because it should go to your respective email, which should, does that make sense, Gerald? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm just trying to figure out how we can how you could change that, because they might be all coming into the same mailbox.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
I know that, like, if you're in the online version of Outlook, it does give you the opportunity to pick calendars, but I don't know if it, I don't know how you do it in the actual Outlook platform. I'm looking right now to see if I can figure that out, but I don't know if there's a way to just have it accept for a different calendar without going into, it might be underneath the actual mail settings, but then that's going to change it for everything. It would be the default calendar to use for all of those actions.
Yeah. Well, let's take this one offline, because I feel like this is very unique, and it sounds like they might be connecting from a personal home device where they've got a different email account on using Outlook, which is a unique circumstance. And if you're someone that's already a MyTech, if you're a client of MyTech's, that's also a help desk ticket. We can actually solve that problem for you or work with you on that. But otherwise, Stephanie, let's take that offline, and we'll follow up with that person individually.
Perfect.
So.
All right, next question is, when should you use files versus documents in Teams?
Use files versus documents in Teams. I'm not sure I totally understand that. I don't know, I'm assuming that they're referring to the, I wonder if this is what they're talking about here. Maybe files here on the left-hand column. I don't ever use this. This is a quick reference for just the files that you've accessed. I don't know if that means, I don't see documents here, but in general.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah.
So one of the things is if you go to the SharePoint site, they actually they don't call those files, they call them documents in SharePoint. And in Teams, it's referenced as files, even though it's the same location.
Oh,
so,
I see.
Like if you were to, you can see how they're labeled as documents there.
Yeah.
But yet the interface is labeled as files inside of Teams.
That's a great point. So that's probably it. Okay, so let me reference. So if I'm in the I'll illustrate. Notice I'm in the Operation Teams SharePoint site, and I clicked on Documents. And notice there's a general channel here. That's basically reflecting the general channel. I've added these other folders, but this folder was created by default when this team was created, the site and the general channel. So these files, as I click up here in the general channel, these files, as they refresh here, are the same files that are going to be in that folder. I've also linked another SharePoint document here, or SharePoint folder here. So you won't see, when I click, I'll go back to SharePoint, you will not see this folder inside of the general folder, because I've linked an additional SharePoint folder here, but you will see all these documents when I click on SharePoint. So I'm gonna go down here, click back into SharePoint. So I'm in the operations team, documents, general channel. Those are the 5 files you're going to see. There's a quicker way to access that too. So if you click on files up here like I did, you will see an open in SharePoint link. If you just with one click, it's actually going to open up the exact same page that I showed you previously. And if you want to go back, documents is just the root file structure for your for that team and that SharePoint site. but then the subfolder is where the documents will actually live, or the files will live. So Gerald, is that what you think was what they're getting at?
That's kind of what I was implying towards, yes.
So it in the end, I think one of the important structures to understand about Teams and SharePoint, how they work together, is that these documents, while you're inside of Teams, and again, I'm in the Files tab, and the Files tab exists in each one of these teams, by the way, by default. It's like if I click on the Finance team, it's got its own Files tab, and I don't think I've uploaded any files here, so I haven't, right? But it'll have its own, and I can open this up in SharePoint, and it'll basically have nothing there, but it shows me the SharePoint site with nothing in the folder. But in general, when you understand that, basically, as I click on the general channel and operations, is where we've been using a lot of demo documentation. The files don't really exist here. They actually are stored in SharePoint, and it's just, these are basically links to SharePoint. So all of the documentation, all the files, all the data that lives in Teams effectively is actually stored in SharePoint, which it makes sense why this link is here, just to say open this in SharePoint. So whether you're accessing the file here or whether you're accessing the file in SharePoint, it's the same file. You're just being able to access it in multiple places, as opposed to what we're probably used to is that we might have a copy of a file that lives in multiple places, and then you're trying to figure out which is the right version. One of the things that's really nice about Teams is that the files it's pointing to the same file repository, basically, in SharePoint, but you're able to access them in both places.
Awesome. All right, next question is, what do you lose if or when you convert a team to a channel or a channel to a team?
Trill, do you want to hit that one?
You can't.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't think you can.
There really isn't a way to basically, if you can think of a channel as almost like a folder underneath a team. One of the problems is because of the way that folder is structured, you can't move that folder, and you can't change the type of folder it is. It's there once you create it. So you can't convert a team to a channel or a channel to a team. That is kind of stuck in its position when you put it there. You can delete it, you can recreate it, but that's about it.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, when I was talking about the ability to create a team, is that you want to make sure that the people who have that ability, or the subset of people that have that ability, understand some of these nuances that a SharePoint site gets created when you create a team, and membership, etc. The other thing is that is really nice. I like how, so for instance, I'm going to click on the operations team, the little breadcrumbs here, and I'm going to click manage the team. The other feature that's nice is that when you create a team, you can designate owners of the team, and then designate members or guests of the team. And then you can choose as far as, what members can do or not. Again, I was just in the members tab. When I click manage team, right? Manage team, members, you can see who's an owner. And then if you go over to the settings tab, you can identify, well, what can members of that team do as far as can they create private channels? I actually don't want members to create private channels. I don't want them to delete restore channels. So these are things you can choose, so that really in the end, you allow the owners of that team to be able to create channels or not, mainly so that accidentally, I mean, things will happen, and you might accidentally create something you want to delete. That's fine. It's just that making sure that the people who are designated as being able to either create teams and or own teams, as far as being able to kind of the substructure of a team, have some awareness and just have some knowledge about how these things work together. That's part of the reason why we do these sessions, is to help educate folks on that, so that you can build out a structure with fewer changes in the future. But also, you know what? The one thing that we've learned too, that we've started using Teams when Teams shortly after Teams came to the market, as you might expect. But we've learned so much about how we want to use it that's different than the way we started using it. And we're actually going through a process right now internally to define or redefine some of the ways in which we're using Teams and SharePoint, because we've learned more about how it fits how we operate. So that's okay too, I guess, is my point. Hopefully that answered the question.
All right, next question is, does an org-wide team include all guest users?
I believe no.
No, it does not. So an org-wide team includes all users that get created, and if you disable users, it removes them from the group, but it does not include guest users, rooms, service accounts, things like that. All of those non-user style accounts, they don't get added to the group by default.
But you can have guest teams and guest members. You know, this is actually a team that we created that we permissioned, and we were able to add. Notice we've added, and again, you see duplicates here, but this is Gerald's account at his MTP365, this demo tenant, and then this is Gerald's account at mytech.com. So we basically created a guest team, and we have added guests that are external to this organization, to the MTP365 demo organization. So you can do that if you, sounds like you probably are aware of that, but just thought I'd use that as, you can have a guest team where you can have external folks, but an organization-wide team, again, you can know whether or not it's an organization-wide team by clicking Manage Team, and you'll be able to see, it'll designate org-wide right up here, and it'll have a little note here at the top as well.
Awesome. That's all the questions there are in the panel right now.
All right, well, let me hit on one real quick, that a topic that came up yesterday. We actually are holding this session, this live session, via feature in Teams called Live Event. We went through the session we did yesterday was 5 ways to hold a meeting in Teams, and one of them was scheduling a live event. So the way you can get there is you can go to the calendar. It's kind of like a webinar. We're also moving our all company meetings to live events. And the reason why we do that is because you can, by default, the audience is muted, and the Q&A panel, you can use the Q&A panel to interject. Whereas if you just hold a regular Teams meeting in a channel, you can't mute everyone. And so you could get that one person that's driving and they've got background road noise that you can't really hear. And so it doesn't give you the controls from a presentation and production perspective. So I'm going to click Live Event. The way you do that here is go to your calendar. Instead of hitting New Meeting, hit the little drop down on the side here and click Live Event. You can title the live event Test Live Event, designate the time. I'm going to designate it tomorrow, even though we're not going to do it tomorrow, of course. You can provide some details here, and then you get to invite presenters or producers. So I'm going to invite Stephanie, and I'm going to make her the producer like she is today, and I'm going to make myself the presenter because I'm one of the presenters. Click Next. And then here's some things you can also do when you set up events. For instance, this one is set up as a public event, which means the live will be open to anyone, especially outside of your organization, versus an org-wide where anyone in your organization can watch. However, they have to sign in. And by the way, I made a mistake in creating one, and I put it as org-wide, and I meant to make it public, and so people couldn't join. That was what happened yesterday. So we had to change that quickly after the fact. And then you can choose, for instance, by default, the Q&A panel is turned off, but this is where you can turn it on or off, whether you choose to record the session or not, or make it available to attendees or not, or make captions available. It's also something that, notice, you can translate, you can choose the spoken language, and you can have it chosen to translate into different languages as well. This is in preview. This is kind of being rolled out by Microsoft. So that's something you might be able to consider at some point in the future. So, and then you just hit schedule. I'll illustrate what that does. That'll put it into tomorrow. And once it's scheduled, you can get the attendee link. And then if you need to edit it, let's say you need to make a change or you need to add presenters or organizers, you can actually go into click edit. And then I could add people here. And if I wanted to make changes that showed up on that next page, I can go down to the settings tab and I could change these settings here as well. You can change these settings all the way up until the point when you start the live event. Once you start it, you can't change. So the reason why I like to mention that is just from a standpoint of knowing how to edit it. And the only way you'll have the settings or the ability to edit is if you are the organizer. So the organizer is the only person that's going to see these options down here to be able to change. So just something that's a new feature in Teams that we wanted to show folks. Not sure if that prompted any questions, but I thought I'd illustrate one last thing before we ended the session if there were no more further questions.
Hey, Nate, one of the things, I just wanted to add one comment quick about the fact that so live events is a E-class feature. It does not exist in the business class license, so you have to have an enterprise license in order to do that. So you have to have a 365 E1, E3, or E5 license in order to do that. Okay.
So, and is it similar to a lot of the way Microsoft licenses that? Is that you can designate individuals with those licenses, or do we have to? So, like, could we have one person with the or a handful of people with the E SKU and the rest of the organization with the small business SKU? Does that work?
Yeah. So any of the organizers that are going to be the primaries in the environment have to have the E-class license.
Okay. So if they're going to be either a presenter or producer, they'd have to have an E-class license in order to host or execute a Teams a live event.
Correct.
Okay, good to know. And here's that test event that we created. If you wanted to get to that, you just click on it, and then you can get those capabilities. So, Stephanie, sorry, was there a question that came out?
Yeah, I think you just answered it. It was just what is the specific option or designation needed to have the live event option?
Gotcha. Yep. Yeah, that was a question that came up yesterday, and we wanted to. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to cover it today. After doing a little research on it to make sure we could articulate that better. But it is an E SKU, and one thing again, it's nice though to know that you don't have to switch all of your organization over to that. Microsoft allows you on an individual by individual basis to designate those capabilities. So that's just something that's good to know. So you don't have to necessarily change everyone. It might only be 3 or 4 people in your organization that might need that designation if that's a feature you want to be able to use. So
good question come across.
Great.
Can you add a person to a call or a team call after you've already started?
You can. So if you're in a, I'll go to chat. In fact, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to this one, Stephanie, because it's a different Teams tenant. So if I'm going to, what I'd like to try and do is, since I've got Gerald and Stephanie on the call, I'm going to go ahead and call Stephanie. So I've got Stephanie in our chat. It's just her. I'm going to call her. So, and then I'm going to hit mute though, so it doesn't create a problem with the session here. So I'm going to call. I'm going to mute my settings here. Stephanie's going to get that call as it comes through on her side. She's going to do the same thing to make sure microphones and speakers aren't conflicting with answering that call.
Sorry, Nate, it wouldn't allow me because I wasn't logged in. Can you try it again?
It wouldn't, sure. No, oh, sure. Maybe you weren't logged in on the other side. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'll do that again. Again, that's one of the things that's different is that when you hit call, it actually, in the chat, it actually calls. And this is one of the things that we covered yesterday in the 5 ways to hold meetings in Teams. So if I did this in a general channel, it actually would not, it wouldn't call. It would just create the meeting and make it available for someone to join. Are you getting it, Stephanie? I know this is kind of weird when we're hosting it in Teams and Stephanie.
Yeah. Sorry, it was just loading and it keeps going to this tenant. So I am now in, and so it should work.
Okay. Let's try it one more time.
Sorry about that, everyone.
And then Gerald, I'm going to add you after the fact, and so just make sure to mute. And if you don't have another tenant open, then I can't do that. But
yeah, I'm ready for you.
Okay, great. And so the reason why I'm doing this in a separate tenant, notice this is the Teams tenant down here. I've also created another tab over here basically in the browser that allows me to call. Otherwise, if I tried to do this in the same Teams tenant, it would put this conversation, the presentation, on hold. And this is also hard to do. It makes it complicated, which is why Stephanie looks like might be having a challenge.
Yeah, sorry, something's going in my separate tenant. It's not wanting to answer it, so I apologize.
All right, well, you can do it. Basically, the way you do it is if you start the call, you can just add someone to the call when you're in the call, and you just add them to the mix. In fact, I'll even show you when you have, I'm going to bring up the screen for both Gerald and Stephanie here. So for instance, if I wanted to add people, you have a little icon like this. You could click on it and you could say invite someone to the call, and that's basically how you can do that. I'll show that outside of the Teams tenant here by going into I'm going to go to the Teams tenant over here. If I were trying to meet now, it would give me the same options. I could schedule. I'll actually show it in a live Teams meeting call here. So test call, meet now, hit mute. Notice how I show participants up here. I could actually choose to invite someone up here by email. So I could just invite myself if I wanted to, like as a guest. So that's where I could type in someone's email. I could also get a copy of the link here, and I could ask them to join via email. One of the things that's important to note about doing that, though, is that especially if you're inviting someone outside of your organization or outside of the team, when they join or click to join, sorry, Stephanie, I'll mute. When they click to join, what you will see on your screen in this participants, like so for instance, if you have this closed, you'll see a little indicator dot that'll show that someone's in the lobby. So you'll have to click here and then admit them from the lobby into the meeting. You'll see an indicator up here saying, hey, do you want to admit them? And it's a one click to admit them into the meeting because you're inviting someone outside of the organization in. So that's one way you could do it if you're in an existing Teams call, but you can do basically the same function exists if you're in a chat call. This would look just like a chat call, and you have the same option here, and you can invite someone to join at that point too. So
hey, Nate, just
yes.
Kind of an update to you. Microsoft has just rolled out an update that now is also producing a pop-up when somebody's in the lobby. So it will automatically also prompt you on the main screen saying that somebody is trying to join, and that allows any team owner to admit somebody also now.
Cool. Oh, good. That's good to know. I knew that was something. That's good, Gerald. Thanks for the update. Those are things that Microsoft has been updating due to a lot of virtual meetings happening via Teams lately. The only other thing that I would mention, again, I think you were talking about the question came from if you're in an existing call, but one of the other simple ways, especially if you know you're going to be inviting people externally, if you already have a team meeting, or if you're in the midst of if you have a calendar invite you're trying to create in Outlook, you can right at the top you can say new Teams meeting, and then sharing this link is with whomever you want to join would be an option too. Like this link would be available for anyone. You would see the same kind of screen that I just showed you in the last session, is it to admit people in from the lobby, but you could basically use this to invite people if you were scheduling a Teams meeting or you wanted to have an external impromptu Teams meeting. You could just click on the new Teams meeting icon here. The other thing is that, as a note relative to the SKUs, we were talking about the SKUs for creating a live meeting. You will not see a dial-in number unless you have an E5 SKU. So unless your individual user license has E5 associated with it, you will not see the dial-in information. You'll only see this link, which is okay. People can join without a link, and they don't need a license to join. They can join via browser. They don't need the Teams application to be able to join. This allows people to join just via browser.
Maybe we got one last question here.
All right.
If you've got time for it, and it's in relation to what just happened with you trying to call me. They said, do you know what type of experience would happen on a multi-user or shared laptop or computer with Office 365 and Teams? I know sometimes it's a challenge when they don't sign out of a computer. So logging back and forth between two teams.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the nature. If the question is, if they're talking about logging back and forth into different tenants, yeah, that is a challenge because by default. So for instance, I'm just going to open up a new browser window and I'm going to type in office.com. Okay, so office.com is it's going to by default look at my username that I'm used to log into this machine, and it's going to try and auto log me in because it knows what I'm trying to access, and it automatically logged me in. So and notice it's my MTP 365 profile. Now, if I tried to sign out and sign in as a different sometimes it hangs on this screen, right? And then it says, so I could try and sign in, switch to a different account, but it tries to remember who I logged in as and who I'm logged in as on this machine. So it will create challenges. One of the tips that I would suggest, I'm not going to log into my MyTech account here, but one of the tips is that there's a little checkbox often that says keep me logged in, or remember me for the next 7 days or something like that. So I would, if you're trying to switch back and forth between accounts, I would not check that checkbox because that way it'll give you an increased probability of prompting you to sign in every time, and I could choose to switch to a different account here basically. So that's one of the challenges that happens between logging into different tenants. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this presentation, not from my corporate laptop. I'm doing it from one of our demo machines that we keep around to be able to do stuff like this, because I would have way more problems when I open up these screens wanting to log me in as my MyTech account versus my demo MTP 365 account. So that is a challenge, but that's why that happens. So Gerald, I don't know if you have any other tips as far as what to help with that or not, other than what I just mentioned of maybe not checking that box when you're trying to log in.
You're muted, Gerald.
Yeah, that helps. So even if you have multiple users within the same company, this is not just a inter-tenant issue. This is even an intra-tenant issue. The same kind of problem happens. It really does generate an issue where you have multiple accounts and then somebody can easily click on somebody else's account. If that's less of an issue, one of the things that I will point out is the new Microsoft Edge browser does have profiles that you can choose. I don't know if you, Nate, if you want to go to the upper right-hand corner of that browser, you'll see your icon object. Actually, up a little bit, up north.
Oh, here?
There you go. Yep. Click on that. You can actually see that you can actually add a profile if you scroll down just a little bit. And so you can actually have multiple profiles as multiple users. So like I have my Edge set up with multiple tenants, all my logins for all my different demos, my different test environments, and my MyTech one. And I can actually launch and connect between different tenants. All my settings all change depending upon what profile I'm in. So that is one of the things that helps, but it doesn't stop somebody, like you can't password protect that profile. So somebody can, like, if I wanted to be Nate and I'm on that shared workstation, I can just go in and say, I'm going to launch Nate's profile. So it's not necessarily a secure way of doing it, but it does kind of separate some of the annoyances that you do see. It kind of helps isolate the two environments a lot. So.
Yeah, just to be clear, so just a couple, I'm going to repeat some of those steps here. So first and foremost, notice I tried to show this icon down here. This is the new Edge Chromium browser. There's a more feature-rich experience for O365 apps on this browser than the old Edge browser and or Internet Explorer. Even over Chrome to some extent, there's some different feature sets that are enabled because it's a Microsoft browser. So if you have that browser, in the upper corner here, you click on the little kind of the profile icon, and you could add profiles here. So that's what you were talking about, Gerald. So thanks for the tip on that. I did not know that feature was available.
Awesome. I think we're all set.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. It's just challenging times that we're going through, and we're trying to hopefully in Office 365 and some of these tools are really helpful to working virtually and staying connected with your coworkers and colleagues through this time. So thanks for joining this Q&A session. Stay tuned for the follow-up email. We've got sessions that are booked out the next couple of weeks. And the next couple of Fridays are also additional Q&A sessions. So if you have stuff that comes up between now and then, by all means, we look forward to seeing you or hearing from you then. But in between now and then, and in the interim, please stay safe and stay healthy.